Hey, Rebel Bankers, this is your host, Chris Noggle, and welcome back to the show. I'm really glad you guys are here to the Real Estate Money School because today we're going to talk about a journey not like many others, because the guest I've got, John Ferguson, has one heck of a story on how he's done what he has done up to this point, but not just how he's done it, how he has failed his way to success. So we're going to talk a lot about his journey from the early 2000s straight through to where he's at today so that you can learn exactly what mistakes he made so that you don't have to make them, and how you can make your process and your journey a little bit smoother. But before we get into talking about John's journey, I want to talk a little bit about you. I want to talk about your journey to becoming a Rebel Banker. We all start somewhere. We all have to start somewhere in our journey, whether it be real estate or whatever it is you do. And that journey a lot of times begins with money. And money is one of those things where we always sit there and are like, if I don't have it, well, then you think you have to put your dreams on hold, but that just is not the case. My book, The Private Money Guide, Solutions to Finding Money, Where to Go, and How to Ask, covers all of this as to where all the money is for you to succeed and for you to find money for your journey. Now, the problem is not many people understand how money really works. So that's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover that for you a little bit today. So let's jump right in. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing what I went through and what has made me fail and finally succeed.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump right into it, John. You told me a little bit about your story, but the best part, I think, is the beginning. But before we get to the beginning, let's start with where your business is today. Tell the audience a little bit about kind of what your business looks today, what it is you do, and kind of how your life is.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Well, I currently am in Dallas, Texas. And we've got teams of investors across the country that we work with and support. And the reason why I did that was because of some of my past failures. We started to find that other investors need people like yourself. They need shows like this to help them overcome some of the challenges that just aren't available to investors. And so now we essentially serve investors across the country in helping them to level up their life. I invest in real estate primarily personally here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, in Texas, and we have offshoots in other areas. But it didn't always look this way. We're doing really well now. I have 5 children, and my wife has an online business that she loves, and back and forth. Sometimes a little bit of a competition, who's going to do better. But it's a fun time. Being married to an entrepreneur, you can probably imagine that lifestyle. Not everyone is as privileged and as I am, because my wife understands me. Some of your listeners may have a spouse that isn't as understanding when they're trying to build this journey. And in the beginning, it can be very difficult if you don't have that support behind you, even if they're not doing it. So, and you caught me in the car. So I was actually going to a property, and I saw the time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to pull off the freeway to be able to hop on the podcast here with you. But that's kind of where we're at right now.
Awesome. Well, so that's kind of where you're at. Now let's go back to that story you were telling me earlier, in the early 2000s, when you found good old Carlton Sheets. Now, I know a lot of my listeners have no idea who Carlton Sheets is. Maybe I'm the dinosaur, the old guy that understands Carlton Sheets and how influential he was and how he got his start with those infomercials. And I know that's kind of what you mentioned you got your start with, which is awesome, because let's start right there. Let's start with that early 2000s late night infomercial that you saw with Carlton Sheets.
Yeah, maybe I'll go back a little bit before that. My father was laid off 7 times before I was 17. And so my background was hard work, blue collar. My grandfather worked for Kaiser Steel coming out of World War II. And, I just remember my father working 3 jobs most of the time. On the weekends, he'd clean churches, 2 or 3 churches, to make a couple $100. I lived with my grandmother until I was my 17 years old. So when I was a junior in high school, we finally got into like our own place. And I saw that struggle. Lucky for me, my family stayed together. But what led me to real estate investing ultimately was because I wanted that freedom. And I wanted to be wealthy. I wanted to have, to me, wealthy wasn't the millions of dollars. Okay. To me was free time, being able to do what I wanted to with my family. And I didn't have private jets in my head at the time. Okay. What I had was like vacations and summertime and, time at the beach, a cabin in the mountains where I can go fishing. So that's the background of my story. The funny thing was I ended up in the corporate world like my dad. I didn't go to college. I played some basketball in Utah. I hurt my back, and so I wasn't able to continue into my college aspirations. I went out of college, got married, and I found myself working at Hollywood Video. Now, that's a dinosaur in and of itself.
Sure is.
Hollywood's not around. And I saw the writing on the wall that I was stuck. I'm in this place, and I was the top producer for the company. I had won the last 3 revenue contests, and I was written up off of my last vacation because my manager had to go in and help out one of the store managers for 15 minutes. And I thought, if they can do that to me, I found myself in the same position where somebody else can control my time, control my wealth, and essentially my freedom. And so I was laying there on the couch. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. Carlton Sheets is speaking. This dude holds up a check. He's a trash truck driver and says, look, I made $100,000 with this program. And I'm like, dude, if the trash truck driver can do it, so can I. And so that was it. I called. I jumped right in. I started in my business, and a lot of people, from those infomercial products, they don't succeed. I did. I was lucky. I was able to get into my first 3 properties with that program, but I quickly found that the method wasn't there. It was one linear style, and I didn't quite get it, and so I spent over a 2-year period of time close to $250,000 in trainings and education and course after course because I was all in, and I built up a really good sizable business. I ended up losing most of my properties just before the downturn of the market. So everyone kind of talks about that 2007, 8, 9 where they lost. I lost before that.
That's rare.
That's
actually rare.
Right? Yeah. I had a partner, and there was some embezzling going on. He wasn't making the payments. I'm more of the outgoing type and like to work with people, and he was on the numbers and such, and I had a blind trust because we'd known each other for a long time. And ultimately what happened is he was feeding his pocket versus the mortgage companies that had some of our rentals in them. And so as the market started to go down, we lost most of our properties. I had to fire sell a lot of homes. How I found out was I got a foreclosure notice on the very first rental I purchased. I was going to keep that come to, hell or high water. They're going to build a freeway over it. I was the first lobbyist to stop it, right? Because that was my baby. Like, that was the crown jewel. It was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house in Ogden, Utah, and it only brought in, I think, $310 a month positive cash flow, right? So you're thinking, wow, that's just great. I don't care how much it was making. Even if it went negative, I was keeping this property. It went to foreclosure. I lost it, and that's when I knew things were really bad. And I just remember telling my wife, at the time we were living in Texas, I said, look, our real estate's over. I've got no more income. The revenue's gone. And there's a lot of bad choices I made during this time before this happened that kind of led up to that. But ultimately I ended up living in my parents' basement, and go figure, I was following a blueprint and a pattern of money that I learned from my parents. Right? When things go bad, move home. Hey, you've always got plan B. Yeah. And, I was an idiot. I was young. I was in my 20s, and I spent, sometimes $8,000 to $10,000 on a weekend. I'd rent a Ferrari for Friday and Saturday. We'd go to the clubs. My wife and we'd hang out with our friends. I was buying everybody dinner. And I did that for too long. And the cash that I had on the sidelines, being in sales and, being in real estate, I figured, hey, it's always going to be there. We've got these skills. The market's cool. Got all the cash coming in. And I wasn't thinking, you would think a real estate investor would think, hey, invest the extra cash into more real estate to produce more revenue to pay for the play, right? No, I didn't do that. And that my financial background was work your guts out, have 3 or 4 jobs. You're going to get laid off however many times in your lifetime, and that's just how it was. And so, that really led me to a crash and just bad choices. Well, and that's where I had to learn a better way to use money.
let's talk a little bit about that crash, because this is where people have the opportunity to really learn. You can only learn so much when everything's going good, right? Because you're almost on you're on a high. You're just going along and everything's going perfect, and you'd almost think that the gravy train's never going to end. You're renting Ferraris, you're going out, you're buying dinner for everybody. It's smooth sailing. But then all of a sudden something happens, and you realize there's a problem, and then all of a sudden someone pulls the plug out, and it goes down so fast. Because I relate so much to that, because that was my life. I've done that twice in my life now, not just once, because why do it once when you can do it twice? And I did it because the same reason you just said. I was using the same conventional knowledge that I'd been taught by my parents, by all the people that had given me financial advice, in my younger years. And that advice is the big lie. It really is, because it's not real. It's just what they think is real. And that's the biggest problem with America. I think the problem is not what people don't know. The problem is what people think they know that just ain't so. Good old Will Rogers says that best. And you kind of hit that crash. Now, let's just talk about your ramp up. When you had this partner and you guys were doing really well, where was the money coming from for those deals? Was it private money, hard money? Like, what were you doing for the funding at that point?
So in the beginning, the first couple of properties that we did, I actually had some resources because I was a district manager at Hollywood Video. I used some retirement funds, and I used mom and dad. They had a 401k and IRA, so I learned how to use self-directed funds. And so it was always OPM, other people's money. And as soon as I got ramped up, I put that money back and never touched it again. And then we made our money make money for itself. And as we flipped houses, that provided the cash to go out there and buy cash flow. And so I essentially, you need money for now and money for later. The money for now came from wholesaling and flipping and short sales. It's I love short sales. And then I would transition those resources into buy and holds. Now, back then we didn't have anything like Airbnb that you do today, but we, traditional single family house, rental properties. I think you really do very much vacation properties, but we did do multifamily, smaller multifamily units, and we just started to scale from there. And that's really where the ramp up happened. And I brought in this partner because we're going to expand different territories around the country. I was like, hey, we're doing really well here in Arizona and Utah. What about Texas? Like, what about, New Mexico? What about some of these other states that are close to us that, Denver, Colorado? Like, where are these places that we can start to approach? And, I brought him on. We had a few team members, but the approach was, let's help other people learn to invest in real estate rather than let's hire a staff. And I said, so if this is going to happen, I'm going to have to go on the road, teach, be in meeting rooms, have an office, and bring people in who really want to do this and interview them for opportunity to work with us, and then train them and go from there more as a partnership. And so I left him to the piggy bank, right? And then I went off on the road, and that's where, again, that I let that be. So coming out of that, I realized some of the mistakes I made were I just turned a blind eye to the revenue, to the cash. Right, I put a lot of trust in the partnership, and I didn't review the numbers. I wasn't reviewing the books, and when it was time to review the books, I could see things were off because they were mismanaged, but it was too late. It was too late at that time. And so, what I would suggest now is whether you have a partner or not, is always be in the books. And, I make it a point every week to be in our books and to reconcile what's going on, what expenses are there, whether there are any or not, and just revamping that. And I have 3 people do our books. And so, obviously myself, I have a CPA, and then I have a tax attorney. And so us 3 individuals, completely separate entities of each other. The only interest that those 2 individuals have is to make sure the numbers match, and I'm, 1, minimizing taxes. Number 2, that the books are correct. And so checks and balances are in place now. Might be a little overkill, but it's because I freak myself out. I don't ever want to go through that again, ever. I will rather pay higher taxes than go broke again. That's it.
I mean, it
was an unfinished basement.
That's so important to bring up. And, very rarely on this show do we get into talking about books and records and checks and balances. And a lot of times, when investors get into real estate, it starts with one, just like it did for you and I. And then you kind of start ramping up, and a lot of people don't have that knowledge of how running a set of books is, and all the accounting and the bookkeeping and all the checks and balances that goes behind with reconciliations. And I could just go on and on and on. They don't really understand that. So they kind of just go in and, a lot of times you just got that manila folder with all those invoices and all those receipts. And then you got to say, okay, well, now what? But then you got to figure that out. And I always tell people the best way to figure that out is right in the beginning. Just hire a good CPA that will set your books up, set a QuickBooks program up for you and do it the right way. And then, don't let you nailed it. I mean, you're not the first one to have a partner who is running the books kind of run it to the ground. It's been over and over and over, because that's the thing. You should not have either one of the principals. I don't care how many partners you have. You probably shouldn't have any of them running the books without oversight. You got to have a bookkeeper or a CPA, or like you said, a tax attorney, somebody watching over their shoulders to make sure that everything looks like it's supposed to. Otherwise, you just can't predict that. And that, unfortunately, that was a terrible time for you. They kind of brought you down, but you managed to climb out. So let's talk a little bit about what happened when I think you said you were living in your parents' basement, correct? Or your parents' house?
Yeah.
It just sounds better to say that you're living in your parents' basement. So actually, if you were, that's perfect. Yeah. How did you climb out of that?
They had stairs. No.
Great answer. Great answer. Was there a railing too?
Yeah. So it was an unfinished basement in a small little town called Linden, Utah. And I have pictures that I show people because I don't think that they believe me. I had a few boxes of crap that I kept from, we sold everything when we lost everything, and just trying to stay ahead of our bills in order to get to my parents' basement. And it was unfinished. And so there was actually insulation in the walls, just no sheetrock. And so we would go to Mexico and we go on these cruises and we come out with these blankets. They're really ornate, colored, design blankets. We actually pinned those up on the walls so that the insulation wouldn't fall down on our bed where we were sleeping. And so, we were there, like that was it. And I just really licked my wounds for 6 months. And I depleted my entire savings. I was dependent on my family, friends, and literally my wife. She went out, and we were newly married. I think we were married 4 months when this happened. And she was used to the high life because we were doing all that crap. And then the crash happened. And, she went and got a job at a tanning salon, and I was not in a mental space to do it. I went too high, too fast, too quickly without a mentor, without somebody to say, okay, you're at this level, you need this to keep you there. You're at this level, you need this to keep you there, right? I went like this going, oh, crumb, we're falling, who can help me? And I fell, and that's what happened. And so coming out of that, I got a phone call, like, I don't like saying this, but I actually had a job for a couple months at a Buckle. I was like, okay, wow. I was a district manager for Hollywood Video. I can sell jeans, right? And that's how low I went. I was like, do I really want to be an entrepreneur again? And I was years as an entrepreneur. And I was like, okay, I got to start talking to people. I got to get out of the dungeon. And I did. I went and got a job a couple of months. And I had a friend of mine come in who was working for a pretty large real estate investing guru at the time. And he came in and he's like, dude, what the heck are you doing here? Like, you used to speak on stages, you're traveling, you had real estate, you're helping all these people. What happened? Like, why are you selling jeans? And I told him the story. I said, what happened? Okay, dude, forget about it. Wait for my call. And so I'm like, well, that was kind of weird. And it wasn't more than a couple of days later, I get this phone call from my buddy Ryder. And Ryder calls up and says, John, you need to come to this office at this time. I'm going to introduce you to some people. You got to see what we're doing. And that was the first time I had really realized what kind of high premium coaching products were, how they were sold, and the influencers behind it, and the coaches and the trainers. I didn't really know that industry was that big. And that was my first step out back into real estate investing, working around high performers and achievers. and I got on the phone and I started working, and I got into sales, and I got my groove in, and I started to have cash now to buy property. And that was my ultimate goal. I got to find a way back into real estate. And that was it. And that was the climb, was one phone call. And, I could have just shrunk and told my buddy, you know what, that's great, you're doing good. But, there was something inside that was literally burning. I don't know if it was the loss. I don't know if it was just egg on my own face for the mistakes that I made. I created my own failure. Or if I really still had that desire. Like when you do this and you start this, you have this thing itching inside of you. And until you scratch the itch, it'll bother you. And I didn't want to go crazy. And so I took him up on his offer, and that was my first step back in to the industry and learning different strategies. Because at the time at Carlton Sheets, it wasn't any fix and flip. It was all lease options and stuff like that. And I started to see, okay, well, there's short sales, there's multifamily, there's commercial, and this whole world opened up. And I gravitated to it, and that's what sparked that next step in our journey. And it was a lot of work. I had a lot of debt. I was still a year behind on my Land Rover. I was able to keep that. And, I'm not too proud to say I hid that car for a long time from the bank. I did not want my trophy to go away. That was the last thing that I had. And I'm thinking, now I'm making some money, right? We're making a lot of money helping people. And I was like, okay, I can pay this off. Like it was close to like $12,000. I need to pay back to the bank of back payments. And I'm sitting there, I'm in a coaching call, and I come out, and I'm going to go have some lunch out of the office. And I'm looking around, I'm outside in the parking lot, and I come back in, hey guys, did I park my car out there? And like, oh yeah, the tow truck, they came and got it for you, and everything looked okay. They picked it up, and I'm like, what tow truck? What are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, they picked it up. They took it away. And like, dude, I went white. I started sweating, and my heart sunk because I was like, really? I'm working my guts out, and you take the last thing I really held on to that previous success. And I think it needed to happen, but it got repoed. And it disappeared, and it was gone. It was the last thing that really kind of anchored me to bad choices and spending my money unwisely. And having that ripped out away from me again when I was making money that we were about to pay for the car off, and I just wanted to pay it off, whether it was back taxes or anything. I don't know how they freaking found me. But I got the car. Yeah, right? And I was like, okay, that makes sense. I get it. Like all that had to be stripped away in order for me to build a new foundation and build it the right way and go from there. So that was kind of the reclimb on the ladder.
That's incredible. Like, but you know what? That happened for a reason. That truck, that tow truck, that happened for a reason to basically sink it into you, to help you understand that you can never repeat that again. Just when you thought you were going to make it, it gets swept out. And the same, and I hate to keep finding these parallels, but the same thing happened to me in 14. I had crashed in 2009, and then from 9 to 14, I started buying dilapidated buildings and apartment buildings, and I thought I was there again. And then in 14, I realized I'm in trouble again, just kind of like that. But I was starting to make it, and then all of a sudden something happened, and it all got taken away, and I had to sell everything, sell our dream house, and I had to rebuild. And you know what that feeling's like, that ghostly feeling like you just described, where you literally just want to give up. But you didn't give up. You just kept pushing on. And today, like, life is a lot different, but you made some serious headway when you failed, because you learned from your failures. You learned how to succeed through failure. And I think there's something very, very important about your story that is so I want to say you're unique, but you're really not. And I'm not taking anything away from you, but every other person that I have on here, with the exception of a few, have all hit that rock bottom. Maybe their last vehicle, their one thing, their golden nugget didn't get taken away, but they all crashed and burned. And then that's how they learned how to get where they're at and how not to make the same mistakes again. And I think it's just so powerful. The more people I get on this show to hear that same story. I mean, it's not good. It's not like people want to fail, but it just almost seems like it's a necessary component to the success model, that at some point you have to take that fall. You do. And some of us get back up, some of us get back up, and then you get hit again and you fall down. But the ones that make it are the ones that just kept getting back up no matter what. You are one of them, John. And it's just such an awesome story that you did. Now, today, you're still flipping houses, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Uh-huh.
And rentals and any assignments that you're doing?
Assignments to contractor or anything like that? No.
Okay.
We're not doing much wholesaling. We do teach others to do that. And so one of the things we do now is, in this area, there are a lot of people trying to get into real estate and are taken advantage by some more savvy real estate investors, but they're taking advantage legally. And so they'll want to buy their first house. They'll put a deposit down on a piece of real estate that is hefty, $5,000, $10,000, non-refundable, without really doing the due diligence. And so now, every single week, I'm on a stage speaking and teaching how to evaluate property and what to look for in different predatory wholesalers, because everyone wants to make money, but there are good ways and bad ways. Mm-hmm. And now we every weekend, we're in properties. Every weekend, we'll go out and evaluate properties. We do this completely for free. We do a meetup. And that helps us find people who want to invest in real estate. It also, for lack of better words, pisses off all the other gurus around that are trying to take advantage. I'm not saying I'm a saint by any means, because I have a profit model involved. I want to make money with the people that come, but I want to find the right people who are prepared to make money, individuals who want to do it the right way and are coachable and are willing to learn. And so we take that time with them every weekend, and that has helped us to do more deals. And so now we rather partner on flipping houses, partner with individuals, because we can spread our business out a little bit better. I can have a lot more of my time back to watch the process versus eliminating the opportunity. And that really gives us a chance to have freedom, have our time back, and at the same time make great money flipping houses, conducting short sales, and then helping, I hate to say students, but really, apprentices or such, that we can help them also take that next level in their life. And so I take a different role. It's not about how fast we can make money. Now it's the process of helping all of these other people. And I can establish 5, 10, 15, 20, 200, 500 people that are mini-me's, so to speak, mm-hmm. that we can help provide resources for because of our relationships the last 20 years. Then if I got 10% of that deal or 15% of that deal, or zero on most deals, because once you're trained, there's no requirement you split money with us. We have a model where if they need our resources or need us to come in and help with the process, then obviously we get paid like a partnership, sure. Right? We set up the proper entity structure. We have a working agreement in place, which gives us that advantage. But at the end of the day, I like this a lot more because I'm working with people who are enthusiastic. They're empowered, and we interview them before we work with them. So we keep the numbers down, but the quality is so much higher of individuals we're helping. And so, yeah, we're still flipping houses. I like to take the cash and buy rental properties. That's a big deal. We're looking at some models in Airbnb. That's a good vacation rental spot around the country. Corporate rentals now in most spots, even here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Austin is a really great area that will pay sometimes 2 times the average single-family house rent for the same amount of space. And so developing that for corporations gives you a lot more cash flow. So yeah, there's a lot more that we're doing and building. I would not be here if I didn't have the structure and the foundation and learning the steps that I had to go through. If I never would have even found these other pieces if I didn't fail. But I didn't let, you can't let that stop you. You have to continue to move forward. You have to learn. And hopefully the listeners that are listening here don't make those same mistakes that I did. They don't go out there and spend $5,000 to $6,000 on a weekend on a different hot rod because you could. They didn't go fly around the country and go to vacations once a month because you could. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's true. Until your revenue is there. And so now we flip houses. We don't eat that cash. That cash has to go into creating more cash before we eat it. So that's our 3-step process is we leverage resources to minimize our taxes through self-directed IRAs or private money. We'll buy properties, we'll fix it and turn it and flip it. That resource, that nest egg, most people start to eat. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm in the money. I got 50 grand on this house. No, we take that resource and we dump it into a long-term asset that feeds us small bites, but those small bites over time add up, and then we've got equity and cash flow, and we can provide resources to other people at the same time. So that money we start to nibble on for our personal revenue. That's one of the big things I learned. Wasn't to flip a house and eat it, because then I've got to go find another house, right? I got to, if you chop one tree down, you got to wait for it to grow. Well, we can do a lot of flipping, but at the same time, I want this other animal feeding me, right? I want to put this revenue somewhere where money starts making money for myself, and we're in other things, besides real estate too, that we invest in. But yeah, it's been awesome.
That's great. So during this journey, and let's just kind of go back to that middle point, because that seems to be like that pivotal point in your life. What was one of what was the number one internal obstacle that you had to overcome on your ride back out of that hole?
Pride.
Okay. It's a great one. You don't even need to say anymore, because that's just a perfect answer. Pride. That's it. You had it, you lost it, and you just, that's awesome, man. I wouldn't even go any further than that. So the biggest internal obstacle was pride. And wow, I'm speechless on that, because that is the most honest answer that most people could give, period. So with that being said, we're just coming to the end of this episode. John, if anyone wanted to get a hold of you to learn more about what you do, what are the best places for them to find you?
The very best place for them to find me is on Facebook, John Albert Ferguson. I work with a lot of real estate agents, brokers, and investors in sales. And so if they want to read up on some of the things we're helping people with their sales process and communication, would be Legendary Closers with a plural, so legendaryclosers.com. They can learn a lot about me there. Message me on Facebook. I've got a profile. I answer all my messages, so you might go into the others folder, but I do search that. If you want to, learn from us, work with us, if you're in the area, stop in, hang out with us. That's always cool.
That's great. Well, you've thrown out some awesome golden nuggets, and I'm sure the audience is going to love some of this. And I think the biggest thing that a lot of times they need to hear is just that the people that are at the top have failed and have climbed out of that. And they've left their pride behind. I think that was one of the greatest takeaways here. So for all of you that are watching this episode, you guys just take what you just learned, pick up these gold nuggets. I don't care if you just got one thing out of this episode. That one thing could be everything to you. And the other thing that we always talk about is just get started. You're on your journey to becoming a rebel banker, and becoming a rebel banker means you got to get started first. So if you're sitting on the sidelines wondering, thinking you got to have this, you got to do that before you start, absolutely not. Just get started and start figuring it out along the way. And also find yourself some good mentors, some good coaches, and make sure that they hold your hand through some of the difficult things, because obviously this is a tough business, one that can land you in trouble. But if you get the right guidance, you're not going to have that. And grab a copy of my book, The Private Money Guide, if you want to learn all about where the money is and how to get that money. So thank you all. And thank you, John, for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next episode.